What is up, everybody? This is Marshall Lee of DonkeyJawProjects.com, and today we have once again Teresa del Pilar. How you doing?
Hello, I'm doing all right, and you?
Doing good. I guess we just had this conversation off air, but
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
yeah, it's just so natural. Just be like, "How are you? How are you?" Like, so where can people find you, Teresa?
Here on YouTube, on same name as down here, and if you want to find me on Instagram, same name but with underscores in between the words.
Awesome. And you guys know where you can find me, Marsh Comics, on most places like Instagram and Twitter and TikTok if I ever go back there. And let's see. Today I want to talk about practice and influence. And the thing that kind of got me thinking about this was I've been recently, I kind of recently binged like the latest Teresa del Pilar videos on YouTube and just catching up and stuff. And, I really loved how you were going through your old sketchbooks and stuff and kind of seeing the progress from the beginning to now. And it was cool because you see a lot of sketchbook tours on YouTube and stuff, and they all have kind of their interesting take. A lot of times they're just showing really cool art and stuff, and that's all great and everything. But you really went through like we really got to see like exactly how you kind of moved towards now. And I just thought it also interesting how you did a recent video about Chris Ware, and how it's funny because you went into how he was influenced by Robert Crumb and what he took away from that, and then we kind of heard a little bit about what you took away from Chris Ware in the other videos and stuff. And it's just funny to me that there's basically two things I want to talk about here. It's funny to me, like the relationship between when you want to be a comic creator and having the time, like how much time do you spend practicing as opposed to actually making comics, and making comics is kind of a big part of that practice as it is. And then also the other thing is, how we take influence and how it kind of informs our style, but sometimes it's not obvious, because I've said this about you before, even on live, that your style always reminds me of Norman Rockwell. And every time I look at it, even to this day, it still reminds me of Norman Rockwell. And I know that's not like, and I remember it was surprising to you.
Yeah, it is really surprising. Still, it's like Norman Rockwell. How? I don't even paint.
yeah, it's funny. But the thing is, what I get from Norman Rockwell, I've always been kind of really impressed by his gesture, and there's always story in every figure. There's always a lot of story going on, and expression and things like that. And observation of life kind of within the gesture. And that's what I see in your work, but I know that's not necessarily a direct influence. But then Chris Ware is, so, I don't know. I'm just curious, like, because, seeing your progress too, it's kind of funny because you kind of started out with furries and stuff, which I think, a lot of people, most people start out with like kind of imitating what they're into or something. A lot of people start out with like manga, and I started out, imitating Tom McFarlane and, Rob Liefeld and things like that. And, and then you went through like this edgy phase, which I actually really like that phase. Like I kind of wish, I don't wish you drew like that now necessarily, but I'd love to see you explore that again, because that was fun. And then you kind of went through this kind of gap where you didn't work on art. And then when you came back with like a vengeance. You're like, I'm taking this seriously. And you started working on practicing figure drawing and things like that. and I think that's where you started getting in your gesture and all that. But it's funny that I was really kind of surprised to see that you were, um, how much influence there is even in your practice work and your practice comics and stuff of Chris Ware, because and I'm not that familiar with Chris Ware. I'm basically just recently coming to find out who he is and what he has done, and I get it. I think I get it outside of I haven't read his books yet, but I would never think Chris Ware when I think Teresa Del Pilar.
Yeah, yeah. I think I take a lot of influence from people that are very different from me, because I'm always fascinated on how different some people are from me, and I find it really hard to understand always. Like, how can you, like, I don't know. In the case of Chris, where he's very, he's a person that is very. I don't know, the opposite of easygoing, right? And I'm a very easygoing person, so I'm always like la la la, everything's fine, and he's like panicking or stressing about the leaves in the tree. You know, it's that sort of person. I super exaggerated that, but I hope that came across all right. So I'm always fascinated by people that take that intense view of little things, because for me, little things, I'm very absent-minded and don't pay attention to things. So that's amazing to me. It's like, oh wow, this guy is like paying attention to that person at the grocery store that uh, is stressing about buying milk, and he's going into their mind thinking like, oh my god, probably they're stressed because of this and this, and meanwhile I'm in the at the supermarket thinking about god knows what, about kittens or something. So I like to be influenced by people like that, because I think they have something that I don't have, and that I can learn a lot from them. So I admire people that are very different from me and that make the most of that. So that's why I really like Chris work. I think he's probably my absolute opposite.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. But I can see that because it's funny because like you were saying in the Chris Ware video, and I definitely recommend you guys check all these videos out. They're really cool. That Teresa did. Uh, you know, he was talking about his influence from Robert Crumb, and I can kind of see the connection there because both of them have, I don't know, kind of a deep dive into kind of realism and almost the negative side of life to a certain degree.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. I think Robin Crumb errs more on the side of things that are just taboo, and like things that are unspoken because we're ashamed of them. So that is shameful side of our nature. And I think Chris Ware goes more into the melancholic side of our nature. And he talks a lot about Snoopy, like Peanuts. That he got really inspired by that because it reflected his melancholy. And I've never been much of a melancholic person, so again, this is one of those things like, oh yeah, so these kids that are always like moping about, this is why, and it opens a window to understanding other people, and that's why I really like both Robert Crumb and Chris Ware, because not to say that I don't have shameful parts of me, but not as shameful as like the stuff Robert Crumb puts on his comics, which is like, oh my god, like the fantasies and the hairy stuff, like all that gritty stuff. And there is some of that in all of us, but I think they decide to take that side of their essence or their humanity and put it on the pages like so openly. And I really admire that, because I find it really scary, like to open up like that, when in fact it shouldn't be scary, because whatever you put on the page that is a reflection of yourself is probably a part of everybody else as well. So it's inspiring because they're really honest and open about things that we're normally not, I guess.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that, and kind of being a little bit, showing a little bit of vulnerability and stuff like that. And also something you kind of brought into that was kind of like focusing on smaller details. So what I think of is like subtleties, and that is something. It's funny. Like you take these influences, and you even to the point where you kind of copied his style to a degree in your sketchbooks and stuff. Like some of, I'm not saying like, I don't even know if it's direct copy as much as you just kind of you really took that influence and ran with it basically in some of your like little comics and stuff in your sketchbooks. And but the subtleties, I think, is maybe something that kind of does come through, because now again talking about Norman Rockwell, comparing that to like Chris Ware, and of course these two artists are so far apart, it's crazy, but at the same time I can see something similar in that, like it's kind of noticing again those subtleties. And to me, for Norman Rockwell, it's like I don't know. It's like almost getting into that, but with joy. Finding like
Yeah.
the joyful moments and really reflecting on that with a little bit more. I don't know, like a little bit more authenticity or something. Like he brought something to his paintings that you didn't see in other paintings of the day. There's a
Hmm.
life to it, and I guess that's what I see with you. You're still drawing on like those subtleties, but it's more focusing on the happier places, or I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think, yeah, because when I think about what inspires me most, I would like to say something really deep, but I think it's fun. Like when I see people that are funny, or when I see something that looks fun, I always make mental notes or a sketchbook notes on that. So like I have sketches of children bothering their dad in the metro, and I thought it was hilarious because the dad was just like with his eyes closed and like, this is my happy place. And I just find people funny. Whereas maybe Chris Ware looks at people and he finds like people being complex, and Robert Crumb looks at people and maybe he finds them disgusting,
Yeah.
and all of those things are true about people. But it's like, I suppose for some reason I pay more attention to fun, like what's
Yeah.
funny about people. And I think as well, when you look at those things, you should never think that. I think like fun has less value than, I don't know, complexity, for example, but it doesn't need to be that way. Like fun also has value, I guess, but not too many people pay attention to fun in the way I do. So I try to bring that into my drawings.
Yeah, and I think it's similar. I think I'm trying to still describe the certain quality that we're kind of talking about, and um, I think that there's something in it. Like another thing you talked about recently in videos was the difference between drawing from imagination and drawing from kind of drawing from reference and stuff. And one thing that you learn when you finally start to do stuff that's away from the cartoony stuff you might have started with, because I started the same way, just not really drawing from life as much. When you start to learn how to draw from life, you realize that it's more about looking, it's more about observation than anything. And I think that's kind of what we're drawing from all of these influences, is there's an observation there, and we're kind of reflecting on what we observe. So I don't know, that there's something about that's part of it.
Yeah.
And so let's see. I forget. I had a little bit of a train of thought there, but
You got lost. Your train got derailed.
but that observation, I think, comes through. Oh, what I was going to say is like, so even though like sometimes the influences might not be present in your work, or my work or whatever, there's interesting things you can take away. Like you don't necessarily take away, like I love things like the image guys, the original image guys, McFarlane, um, Eric Larson, Rob Liefeld, Wills Portasio, all those guys. And Kirby is a huge one for me for similar reasons. And what I take away, my art doesn't really look like their art, though, but
No, it
what I
never
do
does.
take, what's that?
It never does look like anyone's art, even when you try.
Yeah, oh, that's true. What I take away from like different people, though, like Rob Liefeld and Jack Kirby, I take away similar things. They have a lot of action, and they have um, kind of a lot of in your face action and like dynamic poses. There's some gesture in there, and then like McFarlane, he kind of goes into a little bit more gritty detail and stuff. And some of the detail isn't even correct, but there's something about it that it's just fun to noodle around. So sometimes I get some of that. There's certain, and a lot of that is just surface stuff. But like it's just interesting that you can, like, I get stuff from Robert Crumb as well, and I like that authenticity and stuff like that, and I love the Chris Ware, like things like that, like not being afraid to touch on taboos a little bit, but I probably wouldn't go as full bore as they do, type of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So it's just interesting. And on another note, I wanted to talk about, you really, like I said, once you kind of came back to art, you really attacked it full force and wanted to kind of really learn and stuff. But you also made comics, I think, pretty quickly after. How long was it, when you came back to art that you started actually making comics that you would publish?
Um, Comics that I would publish. So I came back, I don't know, 4 years ago to
Mhm.
art, more or less. So pretty much a few months after. So maybe 6 months. But I have to clarify that I had been making comics before that. So before the break, I was making comics that I was publishing in little scenes and stuff. So it was just not a question of starting. It was just a question of retaking what I had left off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But even in your sketchbooks, even I think before the zines, from what I could tell, you were working on comics, in those, and I guess growing up, I kind of always tried that too, and it was always very weird and awkward because what I wanted to make was the comics I saw in the comic shops, and what I could do was so far away from that. So like a little, mini comic or zine didn't even enter the equation of thoughts, or web comics weren't even around
Yeah.
then. So like, you know, it was weird because I feel like I didn't make as much comics. But then I see people like Jason Brubaker and Jake Parker, and I hear, kind of their progress, and they did, even like they would make comics and then they'd print them off on Xerox machines and stuff like that. And I don't know why, for some reason, I just felt like I, I never did a lot of that because it was like, I felt like if I can't do it right, I shouldn't do it or something, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but I like how that comics were kind of a part of your practice. It seems like from pretty early stage. And I don't know. To me, it's always like, I always say this thing where like, if you want to learn how to draw, like just make comics because you have to learn like so much of the drawing techniques that are important just through making comics. But we also have goals to actually publish comics, and so how do you balance? I guess what I'm trying to get to is like, how do you balance that, like practice in your sketchbook, figure drawing studies, things like that, and actually working on published comics? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this whole idea of balance in the past and how balance is not something that happens. Like you find the perfect equation and then balance is achieved forever. Balance is a balancing act more than balancing an equation. So you pivot, you start, you make, like for example, when you were a child and you saw those comics in the bookstore, to aspire to do that was a good thing, right? Because it gave you a direction in a world of endless possibilities. And when we're young and we're starting out in anything, it is good to have something to aim for, because otherwise it's overwhelming. Like, what are you going to do? Try all the possibilities in the universe? No. You say, oh, I'm going to be like Jack Kirby. go, go, go. So it's a great point of departure. But then after that, when you start realizing, I'm never going to be Jack Kirby, first realization. Second realization, even if I tried, I would be just a very sad copy of him. And then you start, like a sort of like a process of individuation, I guess you could call it, where you detach yourself from that aspiration and you start to question, so I have to be myself, I have to do my own thing. And that's when practice comes in and you start to balance. But it's step number one, find something to aim for and run with it, I would say. And step number two, take a moment to pause and start thinking like, okay, so what do I like about Jack Kirby? What can I take from him? And what other influences can I learn from, and what can I take from them? And then little by little, I start saying like, okay, so if I want to be more like, I don't know, Rob Liefeld, I need to look into dynamic poses and not worry too much about proportion and anatomy, right? So they give you clues as to where to go next. And then little by little, you start pivoting, balancing, and trying not to fall off whatever heights you're trying to balance in. And, for me, it's not something that is achieved. It's something that you do on a daily basis. You pivot, you stop, you analyze, you continue.
So take it one day at a time. So
Yeah,
chill out. Take it one day at a time.
Yeah, because imagine like if
Do
you
your
make
best.
a plan for your life at age 12 and you just go forward in that direction. Imagine if you had done that. That's impossible. Like you couldn't have predicted the coming of the internet. You couldn't have predicted the change in the publishing world. Like there is no way in life that you can choose a path and just run in a straight line for the rest of your life. In my opinion, I don't know. Maybe there are some professions and stuff where you can do it, but not in a creative field.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Good point.
I don't know.
And it's funny that I brought up balance because I'm always talking about you can't find balance. There's no such thing. But it's true. I think you're right because being involved in the Discord, we've built it. We, as you've recently discovered, we started this challenge of making as many comics as you possibly can in the year 2020.
Yeah.
And also there is, I asked Peter, one of the Discord members, Peter, he's been doing like these kind of drawing prompts, like just in the art share section. But I was like, hey, you're kind of already doing this anyways. Would you like to like actually do like a daily drawing prompt, just like we have a daily discussion prompt? And he's not only did he say yes, I feel like he should make a book out of all of his drawing prompts because he's like going full bore at it. And so it's really cool. But like I find myself like going there, seeing what people are doing and being excited and wanting to join in. And once in a while I do join in, but it's like I feel like I have and I think this is a big part of the equation is the limited time. Like I feel like I have such limited time. I'm like, I go there and I'm like, do I work on a drawing prompt that's probably going to end up taking over most of my time today? Or do I work on the comic that I need to work on,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to work on comics for at least a half an hour a day. But if I do a drawing prompt or if I do some, even just practicing figure drawing, I could be working on comics during that time too,
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, scheduling is a big thing, and I'm not a natural, but like I don't know if I ever like I probably show this, but I have like these very specific timetables, and then I have over here on the wall like a list of projects I'm working on, a calendar, like scheduling, organization, time management. And especially as a freelancer, I heard there's a podcast called Comic Lab, and one of the guys was saying, I thought I was really good at time management because I had a full-time job and kids, and then a web comic, and I thought I'm doing all these things. I'm great at time management, but the reality is that when he went freelance, then he realized, shit, I wasn't good at time management. I just didn't have time to manage. So when you don't have time, it's really easy because it's like, okay, so these are the hours I'm working. This is the 2 hours I have to do these 3 things, and it's like 45 minutes each. But when you have all day, chances are you will waste all day because making those decisions, like from this time to this time I'm going to be doing this, from this time to this time I'm going to be doing that is time management. And that's what it comes down to for me. It's like, if I have a lot of time, you need to be really disciplined with it, because you will waste that time. So going part-time was both a blessing and a curse for me. It's like, oh, I'm going to go part-time and then I'll have time. And then it's like, oh, I don't know what to do with this time.
Yeah. It's a tough thing. And like you said, I think even from the beginning, like what you were saying there is, we just have to take that one day at a time and attack it the best we can. I think it's definitely helpful to have a plan, like maybe the night before when you go to bed, like at least write a little note in your phone or wherever you do it, and just say, okay, I want to try to accomplish this, and this, tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then at least you go in with a plan, because I do find myself, when I do have a lot of time, usually that's either on the weekends or if I happen to have a day off or something. A lot of times I'm like, okay, I have time. I want to get like a lot of stuff done. And then, I somehow get on different like distractions in the morning. I'm like, oh, well, I have time. I can try messing with this a little bit and then mess with that. And then before I know it, I haven't even worked on comics yet, and I have to do other things,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I find most difficult, and I don't know if this is true for you as well, is like setting my priorities and accepting my priorities and sticking to them. Because it's like, if I say my priority is to do this, and then I'm like, oh, but I fancy doing a character for, Instagram. And then I'm like, but did I do the thing I said was my priority? And, just being a little bit more strict with yourself and saying like, okay, you can do your stupid character for Instagram if you get your page done for the comic, because you said yourself that was your priority.
Yeah.
And so I that's why I have color coded, like the red things are the important things, and if I haven't done X amount of hours of that, then I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it sucks, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do.
yeah, for me the most difficult thing is saying no, because everything seems so fun and exciting. Like you said with the prompt, is like, sometimes I've looked at the prompt and thought, ooh, I could do this looks fun. And then it's like, yeah, but that's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Totally. Cool. Well, I think we hit on some of these topics. Hopefully this stuff was inspiring and helpful for you guys. I know I kind of missed a week, almost a week and a half of putting videos out on YouTube, but hopefully, things are finally settled. I'm in the new apartment, out of the old, and hopefully we'll get more videos coming at you soon. And we'll be on kind of more of a sort of, I don't think I have a regular schedule, but we'll have a somewhat regular schedule. And so other than that, Teresa, once again, where can people find you?
Here on YouTube, same name, Teresa Pilar. And if you want to find me on Instagram, same name, but with underscores in between the words.
And you guys know where you can find me, Marsh Comics, on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And I have to go to the side hustle, aka the day job, and Teresa's got stuff to do too. So we will talk to you next time, and keep making comics, and see you later.
Bye-bye.